Hi everyone, my name is Ada and I am from Bootmod3 Tuner, and today we'll be discussing on how to read your logs for your BMW once you start tuning it. Reading your logs is actually, in my opinion, one of the most important things that you need to do as soon as you tune your car, because it'll give you an idea of whether your tune is too aggressive, whether you need better gas, or you need to step down your tune to a 91 tune from a 93 tune, and the general health of your car, and if there's anything that you need to look for. So let's get started over here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go over what to look for and what each um, channel or output log means and what it is for the car. So let's get started. This is a sample log from my own car that I took the other day as an example. First thing you want to always look for is you want to look for timing corrections. Timing corrections are very important, and if you have excessive timing corrections, you can eventually damage the engine. Not often, but it's always a good idea to take a look at it. So one thing I also want to establish before I get started on this is that pre-detonation and pre-ignition are two different things. Pre-ignition is the ignition of a fuel mixture in your cylinder before the spark plug firing. Detonation is a result of small explosions being created after the spark plug is fired, which results in what we call knock. And this has nothing to do with your plugs. Your plugs are not responsible for your timing corrections. Timing corrections are typically because your octane is not enough or your tune is too aggressive. Before you start looking at changing your plugs like everyone does, it's always a good idea to test to see if it's the octane or the aggressiveness of the tune. Let me show you what I mean by timing corrections that are okay within the car. If you have timing corrections that come, but they recover and they don't have an additional step down again, that's okay. Like for example, you can see over here, -3, recovers all the way, it goes to the top. Another one starts over here, but they all recover. As you can see, they don't go back. Now, an example of a timing correction that may not be good on your car is this. You get a -3, but there's still too much pinging in the engine, so the knock sensor calls for another reduction, and then you get a double step down, which is at a -6. What you want. This is something that you want to look out for. If this is consistently happening within your tune, where you have multiple cylinders doing more than -3, it's something that you want to address. The rule of thumb that I use is that if there are 3 or more cylinders at -3 or more, that's when you should be looking at either increasing your octane or adjusting the aggressiveness of your tune or stepping down to a 91 tune or an ACN tune. So let's go over here. As you can see, an example of a bad timing correction would be when I go into 4th gear over here. As you can see, go down here. You'll see that my timing corrections have 2 steps. There's -3, that's fine, but then what happens is you go down here, and then you get to -6, and then another -3, and then another -3, and then another -4.9, and they don't recover. They go down again. As you can see at the end of the RPM, at the end of the pull, you see that my cylinder 4 timing corrections are actually at -7.5, which is quite excessive. That's quite a bit, and you don't want that, right? So in short, you want timing corrections that recover. If you have timing corrections that do not recover, then you need to take a look. Another thing that you also need to keep an eye out on is how often does this happen. If this happens in one log out of, say for example, 5, you don't have nothing to worry about. If you have these corrections that consistently happen in every single log that you take, then you might want to take a look at it. That's the most important part. You can't judge the entire picture just with one log. You need multiple logs to take a look at it. Okay. So now that I've gotten that out of the way, here's some other stuff that I want to talk about on how to read your logs. So boost pressure, pre-throttle. This is obviously the pre-throttle before the throttle body boost that's measured, and this is the target by the DME that's set. Typically, you want your boost pre-throttle to be just under or at target. This will result in the throttle body being open 100% of the time, which means that you get maximum airflow. As you can see over here, you just want it to be slightly under. Same goes for the load, actual and target. Load is calculated based on the amount of load that is on the engine, also known as the boost pressure that's in the engine and how much air is going to the engine. And typically what you want is you want your load actual to be slightly under target, not too much, just slightly, just so that you keep that throttle body open and you don't lose power. As you can see over here, mine is just under within It starts at around 10% deviation, and it's just under the target. This is exactly what you want. This is a good tune. Now, the other thing you want to also keep in mind is you want to look at your high pressure fuel pump and you want to look at your target. You don't want your target to drop too hard. You want it to be typically within 400 psi of the target. Typically, on, for example, the N55, if your fuel pressure drops below 1800 psi, that's when you start to misfire because and you lean out because the car doesn't have enough fuel. And this is very typical on stock high pressure fuel pump N55s because of the limited high pressure fuel pump capacity. But that's something that you want to keep an eye out is your high pressure fuel pump. If you're having random misfires or stutters at high RPM and the car feels like it's missing when you're full boost, you want to look at your fuel pressure, make sure your fuel pressure is on target or close to target. You definitely don't want, as a safety precaution, anything under 2000 psi for this engine specifically, the N55. Okay, let's see. What else did I want to mention? Oh yes, I wanted to also mention your air-fuel ratios. You want to make sure that your short-term fuel trims are within 5%. If it's not within 5% or greater than 10%, 5% is ideal. Greater than 10%, you likely have an issue. You have an exhaust leak somewhere. There's air coming in, or there's a restriction in your intake system. Something is causing it to go crazy. You want your fuel trims to be within 5% because then that means that the ECU has less error to correct for, and less error is always better. You want to minimize the error as much as possible, right? See over here, mine hovers around 0.95 to 1.2, 1.02. Anywhere between 0.95 to 1.05, in my opinion, is okay. If you 1.05 means that you are injecting 5% more fuel to meet that air fuel ratio target, and 0.95 means that you're pulling 5% fuel to meet that air fuel ratio target. And typically what you want is with direct injection engines, especially on pump gas, at higher RPMs, you do want to run a little bit richer so that the cylinder and the mixture is cooled by the excess fuel, and that also results in less detonation because of heat. Okay, and the other thing that I want to mention, apart from fuel ratios, is your wastegate duty cycle. So if you have wastegate duty cycle that's unreasonably high, that typically means you either have a boost leak, a worn turbo, or some sort of hardware issue. For example, if at 4,000 RPMs, my wastegate duty cycle at 20 psi was pegged at 95% or 96 or 97% wastegate duty cycle, then that would tell me that I likely have a boost leak on my car, because the turbo has to work much harder to meet that boost target request, and that's not good. That'll wear out your turbos pretty quickly, and it's not good for you. Typically, this happens when people switch over to charge pipes. They don't change their O-rings, or some sort of installation issue results in them having a boost leak, and then they feel like the car has no power, and the wastegate duty cycle is pegged at like 99%. So if you ever experience that, that's something that you want to look into. Okay, now let's go over to another log, which is from my customer, and show you what an ideal perfect log with timing corrections looks like. Let me just select all these cylinders over here, and then, all right, so you'll see over here there's a timing correction. It recovers all the way up, another one, and it recovers all the way up, and it goes to 0, and then it does it again. And it goes all the way up. This is what you want. This is ideal. This means that you make power, you don't lose power, and it's good for your engine. As you can see, this is minimal. This is what you want. Timing corrections that recover. Now, okay, so now you can also see that the boost pressure is right at or right under target over here, and then you also see that it is the manifold pressure, which is after the throttle, is right under target. When you manage to keep this right under target, this keeps the throttle body open 100% of the time, and it results in you not losing any power. Because if you for example get a boost target that goes over target and it comes down, what happens is, in order for the engine to not have overboost, the DME closes the throttle body, and then it opens it back up again once the boost pressure has dropped, and that typically results in you losing a lot of power, because the engine is basically cutting power to reduce the airflow coming to the engine, or reducing the boost pressure, for the lack of a better word. All right, so as you can see over here, the manifold absolute pressure is right under the target, which is exactly what you want from this S55 engine. And as you can see, and as I explained earlier, the short-term fuel trims are within 5%, 0 here, 1.04, and negative 0.9, negative 0.95. This is what you want. This is ideal. The other thing that you want to look at, it may be... Okay, so now that we've gone over the basics of what timing corrections are and what is acceptable amounts for timing corrections, I'm going ahead and I'm going to show you and explain to you what each of these parameters mean down here so you have a better understanding. So accelerated pedal, that's pretty self-explanatory. That's the pedal input that you have as a driver. Boost pre-throttle is the measured boost before the throttle. Target is obviously what's the ECU is targeting for the boost pressure. Engine speed, high pressure fuel pump target, and the actual, like I said, you want this to be under target or just within 400 psi of target. For cars that have a lot of ethanol, typically what happens is that this pressure drops. No, but that's okay as long as it doesn't drop too far. There's no problem. Okay, so now let's keep going. Intake air temperatures. This is the intake air temperature that's measured, and this is in Fahrenheit. Ignition timing 1, 2, and 3, 4, 5, and 6. That's the amount of ignition timing that's being used in each cylinder. Let's go ahead and do this. You can see as it goes up, I'm targeting around 9 degrees at 6,000 RPMs at 22 pounds of pressure on this S55 engine. Keep in mind this customer is running a mixture of E20. 20% ethanol for knock resistance, and it makes their logs look really good. Okay, so the other thing I want to mention is knock detected. This right here is an indication of an event that the DME was not able to control the detonation via timing reductions, and it does a knock detected sign. A flag that gets raised. This happens typically when you have timing correction, like I said earlier, that does not become controllable by the DME. These are not a big deal unless you have consistently this happen. So if you have this happening once every log, that's fine. If you have it happening consistently, for example, here and then here and then here and then here, then you want to definitely look at your tune, because the DME is not controlling the knock or the detonation, and eventually it may damage your engine. I think that it will. A lot of people argue against that, but I definitely say it does. So over here, this is not too bad. In this situation, there was a minor knock event and it recovered and it was fine. So I have nothing to worry about there. Let's keep going. Lambda is actually your air fuel ratio. That's pretty self-explanatory. That's the target. As you can see, the better your short-term fuel trims, the closer it is to 1 in your short-term fuel trims, the better you're going to hit your target, because the car doesn't have to account for as much error. Okay, so MAF, high film measurement, I forget exactly what that stands for. It's the amount of air that's being moving through your engine that's being measured by the MAF sensor. MAP is the boost pressure that's being measured by the manifold sensor. Misfire cylinders. You don't want to have this at all. If you have a count of 1 in one cylinder, that's fine, but you typically don't want to have any misfires. Misfires mean that there was a no ignition event. That means that the explosion inside the cylinder did not happen when it was expected to happen. So that counts as a misfire. Let's see, waste heat cycle, I talked about that already. Boost set point is basically the boost set, the amount of boost that you'll be running above atmospheric pressure. That's measured by the DME, and we'll be talking about that in the future when I record on how to tune your own car. Load limit is basically the limit that you've set, the maximum load limit that's available for the car. As you can see, it starts around 230 load, and load in these engines is calculated by the boost pressure, or the amount of load on the engine, the amount of air in the engine. There's a lot of different ways to talk about it. That's how I talk about it. But basically, this is the load limit, and this is the load actual, and this is the load target. And as I mentioned earlier, you want your load actual to be just at or slightly under target. Now this is for tuning. We're going to talk about it. So torque limit active flag. When you have when you're shifting, this torque becomes torque limit active flag becomes 4. That's the transmission requesting a power cut from the DME so that it can shift into the next gear. Torque limit flag of 1 typically means it's traction control. So if you have slip, that's the DME will cut power to prevent that slip from happening. It's not too big of a thing that you need to look at. Torque actual at the clutch. This is the torque that's defined inside the DME. It's not exact. It's pretty close. I would say within 10% of your actual car's performance, provided that the tune that you're running has been adjusted for that. And that's the target, and that's the actual. It's not too important. What else do we need to talk about? This stuff I will be talking about in the next videos. Yeah, so I think that's about it for reading your logs as a simple, basic way. And if you guys have any questions or any concerns, just leave a comment in the video, and I will do my best to answer any questions. Have a great day. Take care.